When you look at these people, what do you see? I see people struggling to stay alive, same as everyone else on Allrest right now, same as everyone else on Ionios. Fighting to live, fighting over limited resources. That is understandable, but sometimes these people are just fighting because they can. The strong wanting dominion over the weak. Why does anyone kill others? They're in your way, or you can't bear the sight of them. You kill because you're weak. I suppose that makes Amalthus weak. But that weakness is why he's standing here today, as he believes the distrust of humanity is what kept him safe all those years. So let's ask the million-dollar question. Do you hate people, Amalthus?
No. I hate this world.
Pandoria looks very human for a blade. She'll be worth a lot to some people. After all, blades are more than just tools of destruction. They can keep you company in bed, so bandits sell them, line up the cores with pretty pictures of the blade inside. It is the same as it ever was. As soon as people are denied something they desire, they try to take it by force. Some give up prematurely, but feeling is there for all of us. Intrinsically, people live for themselves, to harbor desires and struggle to realize them. Sometimes selfish, sometimes less so. That is the natural state of man. So why bother protecting people? Why not let people do whatever? What is the point of helping refugees if Amalthus hates them? Well, he protects people to remind himself. He must never forget what kind of beings humans are. They might appear innocent in their weakest of moments, but Amalthus knows that everyone has darkness within. That weakness is just a mask. As when humans are given security, shelter, food, and power, they reestablish the strong and weak dynamic to have dominion. They can't work as one since the bad apples always sour the rest. A good apple, in his mind, can't exist. We can observe it with the refugees. When imminent danger is no longer, people fight, as they always do. They don't help each other out, sharing the food as a community, but strive to acquire more than what they actually need. So the cycle repeats, the eternal recurrence, as Nietzsche says. Taking by force becomes the norm. And that's why Amalthus hated the world. That's why he cursed the architect's rules that made people take by force. And that's precisely why Amalthus suffocated the baby with his hands after saving him. He healed the soldier that robbed the house, playing a role in this monstrosity. He felt disgusted with humanity, and when Minoth asked was the kid their child, he lied and said that he was too late. But no, he wasn't. Amalthus just didn't want this kid to grow up in a world where his family was brutally murdered. A feeling he knew all too well. A feeling that, in his mind, consumes your humanity, leaving nothing but a shallow shell of a man. He was that man, and he didn't want the baby to be consumed by the void. Amalthus thought that granting the little kid a graceful exit by choking him now was the more compassionate option because he thought he knew what sort of a person he would become. In his mind, the hatred and trauma what happened to his family would eventually consume him, and he would be just like that thief, inflicting suffering on others to ease his pain on the inside. For Amalthus, it was for the best that he was the one to end the little guy's suffering. As you can see, this is a twisted logic, and that's what nihilism does to you. Amalthus has so little faith in this world that he believes if hell existed, it probably wouldn't be all that different from all the rest.
As soon as people are denied something they desire, they try to take it by force.
Not everyone's like that.
Oh, some give up prematurely, but the feeling is there, I assure you.
Well, in that case, why bother protecting them? Why not let people do whatever?
To remind myself, I must never forget what kind of beings humans are. I arrived too late.
Is that right? Was that their child? That soldier? Wasn't that the one from...
Such a cruel world we live in.
Huh.
In Indal, there are a great many paintings depicting all manner of hells. But I think real hell might be closer to something like this.
Amalthus, you can't...
I had hoped once that the architect might save us all.
Amalthus set up the refugee camps to always remind himself to not trust the light of humanity, as it merely masked the darkness of their hypocrisy. People helped each other and appeared to work together because it benefited them. It was a selfish act, certainly not intended because they truly cared about others. For Amalthus, even compassion was just superiority complex in disguise. The strong helps the weak because it makes them feel superior and more capable. As due to his childhood, he could never trust humanity, even when they've shown kindness. Yet there was one exception. One time that he helped two people in their weakest moments, because once upon a time, he was one of those people himself. Just like Jin didn't want to forget and desired an eternity with Laura like Mobius N, becoming a flesh eater to immortalize her memories, Pandoria also didn't want to say goodbye to Zeke. Amalthus helped Pandoria and Zeke in their weakest moments as he saw the innocence within. Pandoria was just like him, carrying her driver in her back. The child Amalthus could definitely relate. As an adult, he could never truly look at that face of humanity with integrity, but I think he always wanted to believe in it deep down. That's why he didn't hate the people, but the world that made people who they are. The world intended by the architect.
A long time ago, I seem to recall seeing a very similar scene. Perhaps that too was one face of humanity.
If you look at Amalthus's worldview, you'll see that power rests at the core. He assassinated and poisoned his way through the ranks in Torna and became a praetor. In the movie Mr. Nobody, when Nemo couldn't get the woman she wanted, he chose a similar path. A nice car, a big house, influence and power. Just like Amalthus, he wanted strength in the form realm to not feel weak and helpless inside. But we know that as the movie progresses, this path leads to an existential crisis, an insensitivity to humanity as a whole. You're dissociated in an endless cycle of hedonism until it no longer amuses you, unlike what Zed says in Ionios. Because in the movie, Nemo tries to impersonate as someone else, to forget his rich, boring life, only for the life's curtains to shut off unexpectedly. As little did he knew, this man he was impersonating had a lot of debt to important people. His rivals were looking for him, or maybe the people he wronged in the past. At the end, maybe Nemo got what he wanted. Maybe Amalthus also desired the same fate for himself, just like Malus. As Tyon says in chapter 4, self-destruction. In Nietzsche's mind, both Nemo and Amalthus were weak people while having all the power and influence in the world. The will to power, as he thought, is misunderstood by the mainstream media. He believes that Buddhist meditators who have nothing on their name, no status or worldly possessions are powerful people because true strength lies on the inside. Power and strength are actually important to human flourishing in Nietzsche's eyes. And this is best illustrated by how people behave when they're powerless. Resentment and envy often brings out the worst in people. People like the Tornin King's brother and Amalthus are good examples of this. Imagine someone you look up to. Envy does not aim building us up to their level, but tearing them down to ours. Think of it as the Buddha image for meditators. You can't progress spiritually while envying the Buddha in resentment. As envy tries to alleviate resentment without having to face the fact that our skills, personality, or mental state may not be adequate right now to achieve these goals, the ego makes us lie to ourselves. This encourages us to try taking revenge on a life we feel has wronged us. Amalthus just couldn't move past his childhood trauma to manifest his own reality as an adult, which is why he couldn't resonate with Pneuma's core, as made evident by Malus's words. He literally can't control it because of his state of consciousness.
You know you can't control it.
Let's now talk about why the architect didn't answer Amalthus's calls. The obvious answer is he wanted to observe the world, like Udu in Xenosaga. But let's not be so hasty. It is true that the architect didn't want to contaminate the sample, if you will. He wanted to see what Amalthus would do on his own with a divine power like the Aegis. But I'm not sure completely ignoring him was the correct choice. As the architect was happy to meet Rex and the party, he saw that regardless of their shadow personas, which he was able to observe, they were good people at heart. After all, we all have insecurities or petty desires, but they were able to push past these resentments and at least do their best to work together. I think the architect was impressed by their resolve and optimism at the end. It was something he never had as a scientist. And I think the real reason he didn't face Amalthus when he climbed the world tree was because he couldn't. See, Amalthus was just like Klaus the scientist. He couldn't bear that side of himself living in Bionis, so I think there were personal reasons for it. If observing humanity is the architect's highest priority, he would not converse with Rex and the party as well. He completely ignored Amalthus because it hits a bit too close to home than any god would be comfortable with, however compassionate or wise they might appear. Amalthus was just like who he used to be after all. The architect could explain his past as a scientist and give Amalthus a different perspective to work with his childhood trauma, not showing up at all to someone like Amalthus, whose very self-worth was predicated upon Seeing the god of this world and understanding his perspective was a very risky decision. Because remember, Amalthus was already all alone in this world. Her mother raped and killed, and now the architect wasn't answering his calls. No wonder he failed to control Pneuma's core, and when Pneuma wasn't there, Malos had free real estate to reflect the abyss right back at Amalthus. It is only natural that he couldn't improve his condition and worldview. That being said, I understand the architect because he wanted to see if Amalthus could still improve in a world without a god, if you will. The same world Shulk created at the end of Xenoblade 1. But I just can't help but feel the architect could show a bit more compassion to Amalthus. At least show up and relay his experiences in this previous world, just like he did with Rex, so that Amalthus understood what the architect really intended for this world. As a result, in Torna, Amalthus used underhanded tactics to achieve his object of desire, which was power. How did Nemo and Amalthus both came to embody the same worldview of materialism in the first place? Why did these people believe that things out there would make them happy? Why did Amalthus want the architect's approval, perspective, and affection so much? See, Amalthus had a rough childhood, as admittedly no one can easily deal with their mother's rape and murder. What happened to Amalthus is really sad, but that should not be served as an excuse for how Amalthus can't be anything but who he is and all the rest, because that's simply not true. We need to ask ourselves, is childhood trauma an insurmountable obstacle? While the darkness is the absence of light, can it ever give birth to it? Your personality is formed out of elements that predate your conscious awareness. From deep within you, the self compels you to repeat certain actions, strategies, and decisions. The brain is structured to facilitate this. In every single thought and intention you have, a neural pathway is formed that leads you to do it again and again. The first response is ignorance and denial. Just like Amalthus and Nemo did, you don't take notice of the patterns in your life. You don't accept the idea that your earliest years left a deep and lasting imprint that compels you to behave in certain ways. You imagine that your character is completely plastic and that you can recreate yourself at will. You can follow the same path to power and fame as someone else, even though they come from very different circumstances. The concept of a character can seem like a prison, and many people secretly want to be taken outside themselves through drugs, alcohol, or video games. But the result of such denial is simple. The compulsive behavior and the patterns become even more set into place. You cannot move against the grain of your character or wish it away, as it is too powerful. Now that's the feeling that Malos and Amalthus felt at the end of their lives. Malos wasn't conscious of Amalthus's conditioning and patterns, and was in search of his own identity, as Jin said. Even when Rex made him aware that it is Amalthus speaking through him, Malos still felt like his character and ways of looking at the world was too rigid to just wish it away or heal. He lived with an image of himself that did not correlate with his character, as he didn't even know what the latter was to begin with. Who was Malos really? Not being conscious of the source of his urges, he led a miserable life. Now, the other direction is harder to take, but it's the only path that leads to power, true power, and the formation of superior character. You examine yourself as thoroughly as possible, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, whether you tend to be governed by high levels of anxiety and insensitivity, or hostility and anger, or a profound need to engage with people. You look at your primal inclinations, those subjects and activities you're naturally drawn to. You examine the quality of attachments that you formed with your parents, looking at your current relationships as the best sign of this. You look with rigorous honesty at your own mistakes and the patterns that continually hold you back. You know your limitations, those situations in which you do not do your best. You also become aware of the natural strengths in your character that have survived past adolescence. Now, with such mindfulness, you are no longer the captive of your character, compelled to endlessly repeat the same behaviors. As you see yourself falling into one of your usual patterns, you can catch yourself in time and step back. You may not be able to completely eliminate such patterns immediately, but with practice, you can mitigate their effects. Since you know your limitations, you will not try your hand at things for which you have no capacity or inclination. Instead, for instance, you will choose career paths that will suit you and mesh with your character. For instance, I'm a highly introspective person, so I really enjoy making videos like this, talking about these sort of subjects, but I certainly wouldn't thrive in an environment where I'm carrying bricks and doing hard labor on a construction site. See, your desire is not to become someone else, but to be more thoroughly yourself. That's why Malus was looking for his identity. That's why realizing your true potential is, as Rex would probably say. You see your character as a clay you will work with over a long period of time, slowly working through the kinks in your armor without straining your mind or feeling guilty when mistakes inevitably happen. I want you to expand your mind to how awesome it is to be alive, to actually have consciousness, to experience anything, to have these emotions and thoughts. Because when you do that, you will realize how surreal it is to be alive. This is what Rex and Jin was talking about. Pneuma's power is manifestation, not just foresight. You can shape your own reality as an active participant, not a passive observer.
The power to manifest what you imagine. Truly awesome. That power comes from the architect. Why do you wield it for mortal sake?
That's what Noah meant, looking at the moon. The world doesn't just vanish because you've closed your eyes. You say it's a bit dim tonight or looks brighter than usual to manifest meaning into the world. In fact, that's why Jin was so impressed by it.
The world doesn't just vanish because you've closed your eyes.
What?
The moon. Think about it. Why is it that the moon shines? Just because we're watching? Of course not. Even if humans were gone, it would shine on, illuminating the land beneath. And yet, we're the ones that give meaning to it. We say bit dim tonight or looks brighter than usual, eh? Similarly, we can now imbue the world with meaning or change it. It's a privilege we were lucky to obtain.
And that's the power of Ouroboros.
We're obliged to use it. We can make a difference.
So we don't become supervillains.
That's one thing to aim for, at least. Right?
Get out of your phone and stop thinking limited thoughts, as Gramps would say to Rex. Since we're predisposed to think limited thoughts as humans, things like what we'll eat for dinner, why did she say that to me, am I ever gonna fall in love, what these people think about me, I hope I get a good grade on the exam. Now, of course, the mundane is important to a degree. You have to plan your day and focus on the details. But your identity will be constrained in these scenarios. The self constantly thinks about itself and its goals. Living like this 24/7, glued to social media on your phone, will limit you. To counteract this, you have to actively expand your mind beyond the mundane, the day-to-day. Read a science fiction book and think about the cosmos. Look at a cat walking on the street and think about evolution. Watch a movie and think about the history of humankind. Close your eyes and become aware of the constant stream of urges, emotions, and thoughts that arises within you without reacting, as a form of meditation. Expanding your mind is sublime. The self-perception is reduced, you're present, you're alive. You get freedom from the limited identity, even for a short period of time. Both Amalthus and Malus were the exact opposite of this. They were constrained in their rigid personalities. They lacked mindfulness, and as a result, they didn't understand their flaws, habits, patterns, and more importantly, the reason why they had such a bleak, nihilistic worldview. They didn't want to grow from the hardships of life and instead embodied a victim mindset. At some point, we have to understand that nihilism is just a view, and a mistaken one at that, since it extracts the observer's power out of the picture, and life happens to these people, so it is inherently self-defeating rather than empowering. That's why Zeke said, "Why did you look so sad?" to Amalthus. Just like Jin and Moby-sen, Amalthus also had sadness in his eyes. They were similar in so many ways in how they approached life's challenges. Amalthus saw the architect as his own father who didn't answer his calls. He knocked on the door and there was no one there. The god was dead, as Nietzsche would like to say. He felt all alone in life, unable to climb out of the pit of despair he dug for himself. He infected Malos with a nihilistic worldview, and at the end, despite who Amalthus had turned into, despite his crimes, her mother manifested in his mind and hugged him in his final moments. His mother hugged Amalthus, accepting his child with all of his flaws, as all he needed was unconditional love, an emotion he always felt this world robbed him of. I think he finally understood that true love originated not outside in others, but inside, in himself. He couldn't truly love this world and its people without loving Amalthus first, both with the good and the ugly.
I seem to recall seeing a very similar scene. Perhaps that too was one face of humanity.
Why did you look so sad like that? That was you too, wasn't it?
Why do you not answer my call? Mother, I've missed you.
If you enjoyed my deep dive into Amalthus's mind, I think you will really enjoy my Jin Deconstructed video right here. It's personally one of my favorites, so I hope you enjoy it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe and tell me your thoughts in the comments below. That's it for me today, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.